to do. But I would like to briefly introduce Donald Sexton, who lives in Tribeca in New York City and has a studio in Goshen, Connecticut. He has studied painting and drawing at Wesleyan University, the New School, the Stacy Studio Workshop in New York City, and at the American Center for the Arts in Paris. His paintings have been exhibited in numerous solo and group shows in New York and Connecticut, and are in collections in the United States, Europe, and Australia. Don was founding board member at Columbia University's Research Center for Arts and Culture. For many years, he taught Columbia courses on management of the arts and worked with museums collaborative to conduct management training programs for hundreds of executives of arts organizations, including the Metropolitan Museum of Art and the Museum of Modern Art. He has assisted the Whitney Museum and the New York City Ballet with their marketing activities and consulted for the Metropolitan Opera and the Pittsburgh Public Theater, as well as for many leading companies such as IBM, Coca-Cola, Citi, MetLife, Unilever, Zappos, and Sony. And with that, I will turn this over to you, Don.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sheila. That was very kind of you. Let me see. Yeah, we're all set. First of all, I want to thank all of you for joining us this evening.
This is it.
Spending some of your time with us. Hopefully you'll find this a very interesting session, and frankly, I'm looking for a discussion. I hope you'll have some questions and things you'd like to talk about. And then I really would like to thank the Harrison Public Library, Giovanna, her colleague Kenji, for all they've done to put this together, to put the show together. We were talking before the break, and I said, you know, it's so wonderful for me to have this virtual show up because I have lots of friends in Japan and China and France and Australia who can't easily get to see my physical shows. At least they can't easily get unless they want to pay a $10,000 airline ticket. So this has been a great thing for me. So I just want to thank them very much. Thank you, Giovanna, for all you guys did. So let me cut right into it, and then so we have some time. We have some time for questions at the end, as Giovanna mentioned. So again, this is about 9/11 afterwards. You're going to see this later on, but if you want to contact me, feel free. My email, you can see, is don@sextonart.com, not too hard to remember. And my website is www.sextonart.com. So if you want to see any other works, obviously I'd be delighted if you'd like to visit. I'll be showing you this information at the end of the talk as well. As was mentioned, I studied at Wesleyan University and I studied art there. But when I graduated, my major was mathematics and my minor was art. And some of you might think that's a peculiar combination, but if you've studied math, it's really about harmony, and so is art. And so frankly, I found these very copacetic, very much reinforcing. Then over the years, I've also studied at various other places, the New School, Stacy Studio Workshop, Coho School of Sumi-E. You'll see some of my work relies on brushwork. So I needed to do that. At Washington Art, I've studied portrait painting. In Paris, I studied etching at the American Center for Arts and Culture. And in Rockland, I studied silkscreen. So over the years, like any artist, you keep trying to be fresh and doing what you do. I also, as many artists do, belong to many arts organizations. And this allows one to have a lot of dialogue with the public, first of all, but also dialogue with other artists. In fact, a lot of what I learned as an artist, and I'm sure a number of you are artists, is by working alongside of others. And these are always constructive criticism, not criticism, I don't like to use that word, constructive suggestions in terms of how things might be improved. So again, I think this is very vital to any artist. My day job, as Giovanna mentioned, was at Columbia University for 50 years. And my advice to any artist starting out, have a day job. And I was fortunate enough that my day job was being a tenured professor at Columbia. And what I did there, I was head of the International Business Division. And so a lot of my paintings, if any of you go to my website, take place or show China or Iran or France or many other places. And that's because I've traveled a lot. But again, this was a great job. I enjoyed teaching. 5 years ago, I retired, and my wife keeps advising me to stay retired. So I'm still retired. I work in two different media generally, oils, and obviously you recognize those paintings, the Arc de Triomphe in snow, the Kremlin. And by the way, if you want to get a sense of the size of the Kremlin walls, way at the bottom right-hand side of that painting, you see this little blob. Those are two people. That will give you some idea. And those are trees. The trees are 60, 70 feet tall, and the tower is way above it. One of my favorite paintings, though, is the one below that. It's called Afternoon in Tuileries Gardens. If you're familiar with Paris, you know, there's a beautiful park, the Tuileries. And one day, a couple of years ago, actually, my wife and I were sitting there. I looked, I said, those shadows are really interesting. And you can see in the distance the Louvre. That's the end of the Louvre Museum. But I just thought it'd be interesting to try to capture this family that was sitting there. And you're seeing a little bit that my artist statement is really to try to tell stories with my paintings, which hopefully we've done with the 9/11 paintings. The other way I paint is with mixed media. This is a technique that I've developed myself. I'm sure somewhere, there's someone else who does it, but I have not yet met her or him yet. This technique involves oil pastels, and if you're not an artist, an oil pastel is a very, very greasy crayon. This is not your kid's Crayola. They cost $5 each. They're very greasy. I use Sennelier, which is a French oil pastel. And then I also use an ink. And what I use is Dr. Martin's watercolor, but very thick. And you see the difference here. On the left, the oils provide mood, provide depth of color. On the right, the mixed media provide much more vivid colors, much sharper colors, and also much sharper representation. For example, the gentleman down below on the bottom left, he was a vendor who was selling flags at the parade of the world champion women's soccer team. And I could never, at least I would have difficulty painting him with oil. I'm sure there are artists who would have no trouble with that. But for me, it was much easier to use mixed media. Dublin is on the right, on the bottom. And right above that is my favorite painting. It's my most recent painting, actually, is about 5 weeks ago. I call it Metropolis New Year's Eve. And of course, you might recognize Times Square. But I decided, you know, all these superheroes have to celebrate too. And so if you could look at this carefully, you see we have Spider-Man, you have Batman and Wonder Woman, you have the Hulk, and also a female Hulk. I didn't know there was one, but there is a female Hulk, also green. You have the Mice family, Mickey and Minnie, you know, you get the idea. And you have the Joker. So when I was working on this, which is, by the way, is a big painting for me, 32 by 40 inches. My wife's saying, when are you going to finish? I said, I'm painting 600 people. You know how long that's going to take me. Anyway, but you can see the difference. And I want to show you this because all the paintings you're going to see from 9/11 are mixed media. Because beside the vivid colors and the sharpness of image, they also have another major benefit for me. They dry really quick. And so when you're painting outdoors, and all the paintings I'm going to show you were on plein air, that means I was outside doing the painting. All of these were done with mixed media. And that meant sometimes I would find a good location and I would do 2 or 3 paintings during the day, because each painting I could do in about 2 hours. And sometimes they took longer, sometimes I had to do a little work on them later on. But generally speaking, oils, it would have taken me a long time to do it, any of these paintings. But with the mixed media, it was relatively quick, and that's very important. Been in many shows, any artist has won awards. I've had solo shows. Actually, the room on the left is where one of my shows is now, 9/11 paintings at the East 67th Street Library. I'll give you that information later. Any of you able to go see it, you might want to see the paintings physically. But again, if you're an artist, you show. That's what you do. And when you show, you hope you get appreciated. And so that's where the awards come in. Artist statement. If you're an artist, you know, everybody wants to know your statement. And on the site, you not only have my bio, so you can get all the details, put you to sleep. You also have my artist statement. And make it simple for you. My works, my stories. Most of my paintings tell a story. And I'm very much representational. I appreciate abstract, but I am a total klutz at doing abstract paintings. I have tried, trust me. I do representational. And so, for example, you see different stories here. On the upper left, you have the Goshen Fair, which, by the way, is this weekend, Labor Day weekend. the world famous Goshen Fair. And there are a lot of stories in that painting. I won't go through them, but one is a mother tugging her child as he wants to play ball and try to win one of the stuffed animals. The bottom left is a demonstration that took place 1 block from my house in Tribeca, from my loft in Tribeca. And you can see that I'm trying to convey a mood there. And it's not even taking sides. I want to convey the mood of the difficulty of the situation with the law enforcement and the demonstrators. Bottom right is a painting I did when I saw a teddy bear on the highway one day, and I thought, gee, some kid must be very sad. So in the painting on the bottom right, you see a teddy bear in the middle of the road and a car driving away, and you might be able to see a little bitty face in that car looking back at her teddy or his teddy bear. So I call this tragedy on Route 4. But any of you are sad, don't worry, I have another painting coming up. The car turns around, comes back, picks up the teddy bear, the child is happy. Trust me on this, I'm working on it. The upper right is a woman alone in a bar at a restaurant. I was having dinner one night, I was the only one having dinner. And I looked over the bar and I saw this woman checking her cell phone, and I say, well, Thursday night. So I call this another Thursday night. And who knows what she was looking for, but I hope she found it. I never even saw her face, I just saw her back. But again, it tells a story, that's my point. So I try with my paintings to tell stories. And I try to have images that are immediately accessible to anybody. And I think any of you have seen the 9/11 images already. Just by looking at any of the images, you know what's happening, you know the feelings, you know the emotions, and that's exactly what I hope happens. I live in Tribeca, as Giovanna said, that's my full-time job location. My wife and I also have a place up in Northwest Connecticut in Goshen, Connecticut, if you know where that is. I'm originally from Hartford, any of you from Hartford, and I always liked the Northwest part of Connecticut. But back to New York City. I live in Tribeca on White Street. In fact, that is a painting I did of White Street. And this is my building on White Street. And we live on the 5th floor. And if you look really hard, you can see me in the window. Well, not really, but I try to get people to look hard at it. So 10 blocks south of us was the World Trade Center site. Now, in this talk this evening, I don't plan to talk a lot about what happened on 9/11, but I'll just tell you briefly because you probably should know where I was. I was in my basement, I was working. My wife was taking our 2 children to school. One boy was 4, and he was at school 234, which is in the shadow of the World Trade Center. It's just about 3 blocks north of the World Trade Center site. And it later became, in fact, the command post for all of the people who were trying to manage, orchestrate the disaster. That was PS 234. The younger boy was on his way to a pre-K school, and he unfortunately saw the second plane hit. And my wife got into the school, and so when the buildings came down, they were safe from the ashes. But it took them the better part of a day to get to friends' homes up in the 70s on the west side. And it also took them a couple hours to get in touch with me, so I didn't know what was going on until they were able to get to a place where a phone would work and they would call me. So I didn't know until late in the morning where they were or how they were. So I don't want to go into that too much more. All of us, I'm sure, have stories, especially if you've been were in the area at the time. Some of you perhaps lost people, and for that I'm very, very sorry. But it was obviously a very stressful day for everyone. So how I dealt with the stress was paint. Again, these are the magazine covers we all saw: Time, People, Newsweek. And again, from where I live, you could see the World Trade Center. So I painted, and this is a photo someone took of me in the area of the Ground Zero. And I believe this painting, I'm trying to figure out what it was. I think it was Hudson at Chambers Street. But again, I was painting outside. I was carrying my easel, my paper, and everything else. And again, if you painted, if those of you are artists, you know this, and even if you're not an artist, you would know it. When you paint, you look hard, you concentrate, you see ways you don't see if you're just walking on the street. And I knew after this tragedy, I wanted to see. I wanted to understand it. And again, personally, what happened then was I painted. And I went to vantage points around ground zero. In the 2 months after I was painting, into November, I believe, I would go there 1 day a week or so, 2 days a week. I would find a place where I thought I could view the site, and more importantly to me, view the people looking at the site. And the people were reverent, were respectful, were quiet, were embracing each other, and of course, we're very much moved by what had happened. And so I'm going to show you some of those paintings now. I have comments on a few of them. I'll show you actually every painting in the show. So if you have questions on any of them, you can ask me. And then, as I said, at the end, we'll also have some time, as Giovanna mentioned, for questions, and I hope discussion. And we look forward to that. So this is the area that I'm going to, where I did my painting. Where I live, if you can see, Canal Street is at the very top. I live on White Street, which is maybe, well, it's between Canal Street and the next street below that. So again, about 10 blocks north of the World Trade Center site. I should also mention a little bit more about how I paint. I said I use mixed media, and this was also on plein air. Mixed media, I mentioned the two things I use. These are the crayons, the oil pastels. These are from Sennelier, and these are the very dense watercolor Dr. Martens. These are very heavy to carry. I have like 150 crayons and 150 bottles of ink. On plein air means I have to carry everything. So I carry my paper, carry my easel, carry my brushes, carry cups. Why do I have cups? Because I mix the inks and I make them into different colors by adding water or mixing inks. I have water, that's heavy. I have what we used to call TV tables, where you would sit and watch television and put your meal on the TV when I was growing up. What do I use this for? I use this to put all my stuff on, my brushes, my water, my cups, my inks, you know, you get the idea. And then I have a big duffel bag to carry it all. When I was young, 20 years ago, this was not such a big deal. The older I get, some of you might guess, the more difficult this becomes. But you know, the thing about en plein air is that it has a lot of energy. I was looking at these paintings, actually, this was the first time, this show, where I saw all the paintings together, because I would look at them one at a time, but I never saw them all on the wall, all 20 or 30 of them together. And there's a certain energy in working outdoors. And when I paint in the studio, I don't feel I get that same energy, frankly. I get a better technical look. I get a better technical look in terms of the painting. And like, for example, the Metropolis New Year's Eve, that was all done in the studio. You couldn't imagine me trying to get 600 people to pose outdoors. So we didn't do that. We just did it. I put it together in the studio with photos of different people, and I put them in there. But my point is, though, there's always trade-offs in art. And at least for me, one trade-off is if I paint outdoors, I feel I have more energy. If I paint indoors, I feel I can use more technical skills. And wish I could do both at once, but at least for me, that's something I'm still chasing. There's another thing when you're painting outdoors, crowds. Now, you might guess, since I taught at Columbia for 50 years, crowds don't bother me a heck of a lot. They really don't. I'm used to crowds. That's what I do for a living, stand in front of crowds. But, and I never had a crowd this big, by the way, except once when I was painting in Prague. And if you've ever been to Prague, a beautiful city, I was painting the church there on the main square. And normally I get 5 or 6 people behind me, you know, watching me work. No problem. But this one day I had 5, 6, 10, 20, 30 people behind me. And I said, what's going on here? It turns out that particular day was the day that the Prague Square Dancing Club was going to have their square dance. And so everybody was gathering to watch them square dance, not to watch me paint. So that was kind of a humbling experience. But I did watch the Square Dancing Club. They were pretty good. But anyway, getting back to this. So when you're doing outdoors work, you can expect people to come up. And I you know, that's good. I actually am fine with that. I was interviewed by Russian television when I was painting. I was interviewed by lots of other media, and I'm fine with that. But again, this is just another thing that happens when you're painting outdoors. Why it especially happens with me is because when I finally put the colored inks on top of the crayon colors, the colors just pop out. They just become very vivid at that point, and everybody seems to like that. So we're going to talk about the paintings individually, but in the virtual exhibit that Harrison has set up for us, there are 20 paintings. And so I'm going to talk about maybe 8 or 9 of them, and I will go through the others. And if there are questions now or later, actually, Giovanna, maybe if someone has a question on a particular painting, we could let that one slip through.
Sure.
If we can do that, and then we'll cover the whole thing. So this is 10 of the paintings, and here's the other 10. And you can see just as a glance that most of them, as I said, are locations. A couple exceptions, which I'll mention in a moment. I mean, they're locations around ground zero. And just about all of them have people standing quietly. As I said, the word that keeps coming back to my mind is reverence, with reverence for what had happened and wanting to share with others their feelings. This is the one painting in the virtual exhibit that actually was not near ground zero. This is across the street from where I live in Tribeca. It's 45 White Street. I live just across the street from there. And I took a photo of this building shortly after 9/11. And I'm sure you all noticed what caught my eye. The gray building, and then the stars and stripes, adding an accent to the scene. And even though this is not done at ground zero, in my mind, whenever I see this painting that I did, I always, and this, by the way, this painting has won some awards. I think of the day, the 9/11 day, and the days thereafter, because where I live became a community then. Again, Tribeca, if you're not familiar with Manhattan, is at the bottom of Manhattan Island. And basically, I've lived here for 35 years, and I've seen it become basically a family town. I've lived in the suburbs. I lived in a town called Upper Nyack. Some of you may know where that is, Upper Nyack, New York. And there, when one of my children grew up, you met people at soccer games, and you knew other families through school. Well, in Tribeca, that also happened. Both of my boys played soccer. And that's how we met other families. But an angle that I've never seen covered in articles about 9/11 is how our community came together, the Tribeca community. We're talking about a few thousand people, a few thousand families maybe. And basically, this was not just a political event. This was a very personal event for all of us. People who worked there, who lived in the area, worked there. Some of them perished. The soccer fields were 2 weeks before my boys had practiced soccer, became a campground for the National Guard troops. The school where my older boy went, I already mentioned to you, PS 234, became the command center for the National Guard and others who were trying to orchestrate the efforts after 9/11. The World Trade Center itself was a shopping mall. It wasn't the only place we shopped, but the first floor, the basement floor, was a giant shopping mall. And wherever you went in Tribeca, you could always see the World Trade Center. When I ran, I would run through the towers, between the towers, and look up. And there was a wonderful restaurant called Windows on the World at the top of one of them. All of this obviously was gone. And more importantly, many, many people lost their lives because of this. The result, as I said, was the community pulled together. And for the next several weeks, from around the world, our schools would get greetings and supplies from everywhere. And people would send paper, and they'd send pencils, and they'd send books. And eventually we had so much stuff coming to our schools here, we had to send it to other schools because we could never use it, all of the stuff that people in their generosity sent to us. When we got together, when we walked in the street, we all felt close together. People I didn't know at all. We felt close together because of what had happened. And again, it was tragic in so many ways, but one thing was it brought us closer together down here in Tribeca. So that's why I included this painting, because to me is a tribute to the neighborhood as well. This is my favorite painting of the ones of 9/11. That's St. Paul's Chapel, which is, just a few hundred yards from really the World Trade Center site. And that is where people would put banners. You can see some of the banners. They would put photos of loved ones. They put messages, and it was very moving to see it. And I especially wanted to, I've done many paintings of St. Paul's, several anyway. And I wanted to show this one particular because of the one woman who was looking across. Who knows what she was thinking? But you can barely see the wreckage in the middle on the top. That is part of the World Trade Center. St. Paul's Chapel. St. Paul's Chapel, again, it became kind of a center eventually for people down there, and you would have crowds walking around there and, and worshiping, and again, remembering. This, I think, is the painting I think most portrays what it was like, because you see in the background the World Financial Center. That didn't go down, but right in front of it, you see a pile of wreckage, of rubble, all those black girders. And in the foreground, you can see a number of people watching, especially you see that couple embracing as they're looking at the wreckage. And I found that very moving. And of course, the police were keeping people away. It wouldn't be safe to be near there. And of course, they also had to do their work. But you have the line of people, and this is a motif that's repeated in many of the paintings. A police line there, the barricades, and people standing quietly, silently looking across Broadway. This was at Broadway and Maiden Lane. Again, if you know Manhattan, this would be about three or four blocks below St. Paul's Chapel. In other words, south of St. Paul's Chapel on Broadway. This is from the south. This is Richter Street. You might be able to make it out on the street sign there, Richter, green street sign, and Greenwich. But Greenwich, of course, didn't exist where the World Trade Center was. I mean, it was totally covered. Again, you can see the rubble if you look there. And again, you can see the crowds of people standing, again, looking at the wreckage. I did several paintings of Rutgers Street because I thought it was such a contrast between, you see the signs, the deli sign and so on. And then right behind it, the wreckage. This is from the north. This is Reed Street, I believe. And the leaves were just turning. I mean, it was September 11th. And the leaves were turning, as you can see on the right. It was a beautiful day in New York City until 8:30 when the first plane hit. But it was a beautiful day and the skies were clear. This is basically, let me just, so I don't remember every single address. This is John at Broadway. I did several paintings from this vantage point. Again, you can see the wreckage coming off over on the right there. But this is a different angle from a scene I showed you before, John Street. And I think I have at least a couple more of John Street. This had a lot of interest for me because of the wide spaces and you could see more people. Oops. Sorry about that. I seem to be stuck here, Giovanni. There is more to the talk, actually.
Okay. And you hit the enter button. I mean,
Yeah.
somehow it's wants us to
Yeah, let me just, there we go.
contemplate the image.
We got it.
Okay.
I don't know what's happening. Anyway, this is from the north, Church Street at Berkeley. Well, that's a post office on the right, but this was probably done in November because you can see the excavation machines And I think they were moving in to try to, repair the site and get things started. Immediately to the left, which you can't see it, but there's a church, St. Peter's, which is one of the few churches, again, in the paintings I'm showing you. Let's see what happens. Here we go. I also visited several fire stations, and this is one, I believe it's engine 39. And our family even knew some of the firefighters who lost their lives. One of them was father of a child with which our younger boy played with. And he had been out in a fire the night before. And so when he was called for the 9/11 crisis, his captain said, "Why don't you take some time off?" And so he walked away a couple of 100 yards from the truck. And that time, a piece of the World Trade Center fell on the truck and killed all his friends. Just impossible to comprehend the kinds of things that were happening. So in this firehouse, you can see the bunting, and I'm sure people talking, and there are pictures of people who had fallen. This was also, I think, at John Street too, but from a different angle. And what you can see there is a street sign said, "Please," which I thought was sort of appropriate in a way. Please don't do this. You can see the World Financial Center in the background, but you can also see in the middle ground the wreckage of the site. This is near St. Paul's Chapel. If you were to look to the right, you would actually see St. Paul's Chapel. And again, I wanted to have a different angle. And so directly in front of us is part of the base of the World Trade Center. So all that black and gray, those were some of the decks of the World Trade Center. Now I've been living, as I said, in Tribeca since '84. And I think it was in the 90s that another attempt had been made to blow up the towers. And it was a van filled with explosives. And several people died because of that, unfortunately. I could hear that explosion from where I was 10 blocks away. But the Trade Center was sturdy enough to withstand that, but it was not sturdy enough to withstand two large planes filled with jet fuel. This is Richter Street again. I mentioned to you that I did several Richter Street paintings. And again, that seemed to have more of a contrast, if you will, between a city that was still alive. I mean, these stores, the delis were still open down here, but right behind it, you can see the wreckage there in the left center of the painting. This was, I think, Church Street. I think I have to take a quick look. Greenwich, Greenwich Rector also, as I said, I did several of these from a slightly different angle. Oops, let me go back. This, I told you before when I showed you another painting, there's a church on the left, if you remember that. Well, this is a little bit more of the church, not a whole lot, but a little bit more. But this is, as I said, from basically the same vantage point. And as what I said before, I would usually pick a vantage point and then do 2 or 3 paintings from that vantage point. Each one slightly different, some landscape, some portrait, but each one slightly different. But that's St. Peter's on the left. This is the World Financial Center from Broadway. And again, you can see couples, others, people standing, looking. And I think we are back to John Street again. And again, you can see the angle here, the wreckage on the right. And Reed Street, or the Hudson rather, at Chambers. And there's a little park on the right there. And in fact, there's a market that has very good bagels right near you. But again, you couldn't, this is where the police line set up. I should say that after the crash, after the towers fell, I live, as I said, on White Street, which is a little bit below Canal. But then the area was cordoned off to 14th Street. And again, if you know Manhattan, Lower Manhattan, that's a long way. 14th Street is, I'm guessing, 2 miles from where I live. And it wasn't until a week or two passed that they brought the cordon back down to Canal Street, which allowed us to get our car, among other things. But again, during that period, we had to show proof of residence. So we had our utility bills and so on, but that was the only way we could even get back to our loft. My wife was telling me, she said, you know, it really was fortunate. For some reason, she said, closed our windows and turned off the air conditioning. Had she not done that, our whole loft would have been coated with ash again, and we were 10 blocks away. And again, this is, I think, this is church, and looking again north, south toward the wreckage. That's the World Trade Center. So it's probably looking southwest. I'm sorry, World Financial Center, excuse me. So looking southwest. And finally, I like this painting too, because it's one of the first ones I did, actually. Again, it's John Street and Broadway. And on the right side there, I don't know if you can see it, but it's a very ornate building with gold plates and so on. That was a former bank. I forgot who's in there now, but it's a very impressive old building. But then you have a lot of other stores like on the left. I think that you had Golfland. Maybe that was Golfland on the left. But the more important thing is the people. And they would just stand there and stand there and stand there and look and think and feel. And so St. Paul's, again, as I said, you can see in the front the banners. There were also pictures. There are also names. Very, very moving. So those were the 20 paintings. We went through all 20 of them. If there's anyone you want me to talk about in particular, I'd be happy to. This is 10 of them. I don't know, Giovanna, do we have on the chat anything about particular paintings? Or?
What we have on the chat are laudatory comments on, I loved the pictures of St. Paul's. It is absolutely beautiful. It could be so tough to draw many people. Definitely amazing. That's all from Akiko.
Thank you. Thank you. And again, since I was doing these outside, these actually were real people. As I said, not that the people in the Metropolis painting weren't real, but they weren't there at the time. I just put them there because I took photos of people in Times Square and I put them there, but that's what you can do in the studio. And that's because you wouldn't believe how hard it is to get 600 people to just remain motionless while you paint. But so I could do that with Times Square. This was outdoors. And so these were people, at least at some point, who were there standing the way I showed them, wearing the clothes I showed them wearing and the colors. I didn't change anything. And I froze them at one moment. And basically, after I drew them, then I went on with the clothing and so on. But basically, these were how they were standing.
So they're frozen in time, so to speak.
Yeah, the moment. And again, if you remember back to why I said I did this, this helped me a lot get through this, because all of us, I'm sure, experienced this in whatever way, touched us. And for me, it would have been easy to sort of go back to my basement office and forget about it. I didn't want to do that. I couldn't do that. There's no way I would do that. So I wanted to be out there, and I wanted to be walking around. And someone asked me the other day, did you see any other artists when you were doing this? A reporter for a newspaper was asking me the question. And I never thought about that before, because it honestly made no difference to me, because I was going to be there. I actually saw no one else. I didn't see anybody else painting. Maybe they were drawing or something, and maybe they were in different places than I was. But, and I don't mean to say this, makes me somehow special. But for me, this was, as I said, a way to release. And it may not have been that way for anybody else.
You might have mentioned this. So how big are these? The sheet of the paper that you...
let me go back to this. They're basic. These are all basically. You actually saw the sketch pad I used, or one like it, and the standard page in the sketchbook is 18 by 25 inches. So all of these are 18 by 25 unframed, and then but they're all because they're of the media, namely oil pastels and ink. They're all need to be framed under glass. Which, by the way, scares the heck out of me. Anyway, so I frame them all under glass, and then there's matting. I typically mat 2.5 inches around. So they come out, generally speaking, 25 by 30, plus or minus an inch. But they're generally 25 by 30, fully matted and framed. But again, that makes them difficult to carry. In a moment, I was going to give you the addresses of the physical shows, but I had to load up my car with 30 paintings, and one of them broke. But I felt pretty good that only 1 in 30 broke, because some of them were, I was just, when you have like 10 layers of paintings, each one weighs 5 pounds. It's, but that's the glamorous part of painting, transporting the paintings. It's not, trust me, it's not the receptionist. It's carrying all this painting around and then driving nails into the walls.
Yeah, it's part of the process.
I have a younger son who is very good at that, so that helps a lot.
We do have a question from Lori, who wants to know, how long would it take you to finish a painting?
Very good question. So I'll tell you the secret, because I usually don't tell people this. These are to be 2 to 3 hours. And the reason is that they dry quickly. I'll tell you another secret. I stopped painting in oils for 30 years. I only started painting in oils last year because I'm not a patient person. And if any of you paint with oils, you need to be patient. If you touch an oil painting, as I do, and I can't resist it, eventually it becomes mud. And so one thing that happened that was good, I don't know if there's anything good from the pandemic, but at least it taught me patience. And during the pandemic, I realized, yes, I could still do the mixed media, which I enjoy. I find it exciting, because when people go to my shows, the #1 comment they make is, I love the colors. The colors are vivid and lively. So I like that. I like the mixed media. But I found with the oils, I could do much more moody pieces. I don't know if you remember the demonstration one, or the Tuileries Garden one, or the Arc de Triomphe. I could never get those effects with mixed media. But to answer your question, I know I'm not answering your question yet, but any of those would take me 5 or 6 days to finish. Not that I'd be working continually, but I'd be working an hour each day. Because if I work more than an hour on a wet canvas, I would mess it up. Trust me, I would mess it up. And so nowadays what I do is I alternate. I maybe do a couple days where I just do mixed media, because I can't do both media at the same time. So I'll do a couple days where I'll do 2 or 3 mixed media paintings, and then I'll start some oil paintings, and I'll time them in such a way that any day there'll be 3 or 4 of them I can work on. And so I'll be working on maybe 5 or 6 at a time, and I'll deliberately know that I'm going to put aside a couple of days for them to dry a little bit anyway, so I can work back on them. So basically, the answer to your question, the mixed media ones, which that's what all these are, they take 2 or 3 hours, generally speaking. The oil paintings, they can take a while.
Rosemary Klein has a comment. I like that the paintings are representational, but somehow impressionistic. Make them look urban, like any neighborhood street scene in New York City. So specific, but timeless.
Thank you so much. That's very kind of you. I guess I made a choice sometime in my life that, as I said before, when I realized I couldn't do abstraction, that maybe I ought to look at this representational stuff. But the very first painting I showed you, I don't know if you recall, it was my street, White Street. That actually was my first award winner, Best in Show. And I did that 30-some years ago. And I used to do all these paintings around the world. If any of you visit my website, you'll see them. In fact, let me just skip to, I told you. Giovanni, let me just skip a couple slides here.
Sure.
First of all, and then because I promised people if they were interested, they could get my website, and if they hadn't written it down, I'll just move it. So, so there are 3 shows going on now. There's a virtual show, and I'll resume questions in a second. There's a virtual show, which again, I really appreciate, and we're very grateful to Giovanna and her colleagues. Then there are 2 physical shows, if any of you are in New York City area. One is at the East 67th Street Library. There's the full address, but it's a beautiful building, by the way. When I first exhibited there a few years ago, I said, would you like me to do a painting of your building? And they said, yes. And then I started doing it. I said, oh my God, is this difficult? You can't really see it, but if you ever see this building in reality, it is very, very ornate. I think it was Carnegie or someone who donated the money for this. And it's really difficult. I said, what did I do? But I gave them the painting, and they believe they like it. And then because, as I said, my studio is up in Goshen. I mentioned earlier, there's another show in Northeast Millicent. The majority of the paintings are in 67th Street, but there are a number of paintings in Northeast Millicent, which is a much smaller space, but I've exhibited there before, and they're very good people. And I wanted to have an exhibit up there as well. So Millicent Library or East 67th Street. And this is my question slide. I've already been asking questions, so I can't show you my clever question slide. So let me do this one. So this is what I wanted to show you. So any of you are interested, emailing me, I answer emails. I know people who don't, and I know people who do. I answer emails. And on the right is the website, which has, should you be interested in other things besides 9/11, it has a whole bunch of other stuff. So I'm sorry, so go back to the questions. Are they?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
We're a small enough group that if someone wants to unmute themselves and ask the question out loud, you're welcome to do that as well. And if you are shy, you can also type the question in the chat box. So I'm curious what you're working on now, if there's a specific series you're working on at the moment, or.
Well, first of all, I feel very lucky. I've heard of writer's block. I have never had artist block ever. I have so many things I want to do. I'll give you one project I'm doing. I think we all might agree that last year was not a great year. And there have been moments this year that haven't been great either. So I'm doing a series of paintings on 2020. And they range from the day I got my vaccine shot to the line waiting to get their vaccine shot, or the COVID test or whatever. And there'd be things about demonstrations. As I said, where I live in Tribeca, we were very close to a demonstration. In fact, we had to board up our windows because of just people getting out of hand. And we did. And when it was over, we onboarded it. Didn't change my political views at all, which you might, I'm not going to tell you what they are, but since I live in New York City, you might guess. Any case, so I'm working on that. That's a project. I have a series, believe it or not, on weddings around the world. And if you go on my website, you see I have 4 or 5 paintings there already in Paris, in Hong Kong, in New York City, my daughter's wedding in California. But I thought it would be interesting to do, I have one of photographers taking pictures of brides in Central Park. For a while I was doing a series on amusement parks, which appealed to me because of all the colors. And I still have a weakness for amusement parks. I'm doing a series on stores in Singapore. If you've ever been to Singapore, there are whole blocks of stores that are extraordinarily colorful. And I don't usually work small. And I found out that even though I don't think 18 by 24 is that large, for some people it is. So I'm trying to do pieces that are like 10 by 14 inches. And so I'm going to do some Singapore stores. I'm going to do vending machines, not machines, but vending stores, like at the Goshen Fair coming up this weekend. I've taken pictures of the hot dog stands and the ice cream stands and so on. And so I'm going to do a bunch of 10 by 14 paintings on that. Turns out I can do flowers pretty well. If you go on my website, and whenever I need a birthday gift, I make a flower painting. It's a lot cheaper than going to Coach. And but in all seriousness, so my technique, my mixed media technique, lends itself to flowers very well. I'm going to continue to do New York City. I've been in New York City for 50 some years, so I love New York City. And there's just so much more of New York City I can do. And the street I live on, White Street, is the only street in New York City which is all cast iron buildings. Cast iron building, you saw a painting of my building, and the one across the street with the stairs in the front, the metal stairs, those are cast iron buildings. And once upon a time, they were the homes of textile merchants and dressmakers and things like that. So I'm still going to continue to do that. You see, I have no problem finding things to do. I'm sure there are other things that I can't think of offhand that I'm dying to get to.
Do you do commissions if someone sends you a photograph?
I do actually. Whoever said that, I appreciate you saying I do, but I am not shy about commissions. In fact, I love to do them because what could be better than doing a painting for someone who knows what they want in a painting, and as opposed to what I think it should be. And so I've done paintings. A friend of mine, he and his wife would go to this restaurant on the East Side, and they regularly, and they wanted to remember that. Or someone had a home they really liked, or a vacation. I had a friend of mine I grew up with in school, motorcycle guy. He lives out in Colorado now. He wanted me to do a painting of him looking at Pikes Peak, and so which I did, which was fun for me, by the way. And in fact, you can see it on the site. It's on the site, the Pikes Peak one. And so basically, if something I can take photos of, I will. I mean, my first big commission was someone wanted me to do a painting for her husband, who really liked this Grand Army Plaza in Brooklyn. I've never been there, actually. So I said, why don't you send me some photos? And she sent me some photos, and I did the painting. So anyway, that's a long answer to your question. But I work from photos, or if it's someplace I've been, or someplace I can take a picture, I'll work from my photos, or some combination, whatever. But yeah, sure. And again, I just think it's a good thing. I would like my paintings to connect with people. Really, I'm not trying to be obscure.
No, not at all. I mean, I guess it's the librarian in me who's curious. Will you put together a book, a memoir, combination of your art and your memoir, for others to read about your work and your inspiration?
Well, that's, again, I appreciate the thought. I haven't got that far yet, although my work has appeared in books. And someone was a book about feelings, and she felt my work was appropriate for that. So I think she put a couple in there. And but it's something I think is a nice idea, and I appreciate it. I have to really think about it. I'm in the process, by the way, of doing other stuff. I haven't done note cards. I haven't done a lot of my stuff because it's so colorful. Not 9/11, by the way. In fact, just as an aside, I honestly don't expect to sell the 9/11 paintings. If someone's interested, I'd be happy to talk with them. But in all the shows, I have not put any price list on the 9/11 paintings. And so I keep asking myself, why are you doing this? And I think the answer, this is part of my process of healing, to show these 20 years later. I don't mean to make that sound some kind of classical thing or other. It's just, I don't understand why I'm doing this otherwise, except I wanted them in one place. So if they were interesting to other people, maybe they'd be helpful to them. And that's why I call it 9/11 afterwards. It would frankly be very easy for me to do a painting of a plane hitting a building. I mean, I could do that with oils. That would be easy to do. I don't mean that in the bad sense, but just I know what I would do. It would take me 3 days, and I give you the painting. I don't want to do that. In fact, in the show, the physical shows, or even the virtual show, I debated whether I should even put anything about it. And I showed you a few magazine covers in this show, more just to put us back then. But in the physical shows, there's nothing about planes hitting the buildings. Nothing. It's just all the paintings I showed you. So again, I guess where I would end there is that, I would like to put stuff together. And I'm going to have another show at the East 67th Street Library. Give me a chance to put a little commercial here. But the 9/11 show ends on October 16th. But then we're going to be there for 2 more months. And I'm going to do a show, basically. I haven't know exactly what I call it, but it's going to be, the working title is Don's World. And it's basically paintings from everywhere, New York City, but also, as I said, Japan, South Korea, China, Brazil, Australia, New Zealand, India, France, England, places I've been and spent a lot of time in. So that's what, and we're going to also show a lot of ones of amusement parks, because the library has a lot of programs for kids. So I wanted to do put some paintings on the walls that they could say. Actually, the Times Square ones I was talking about, the one I showed you, but there are two brothers or sisters of those. Each of them I put superheroes. If you've been to Times Square, a lot of people dress up as Spider-Man or Captain America, whatever. So that delights me. And so what I've done, it probably doesn't delight a tourist when they come over and want $5 for a picture, but it delights me to see Spider-Man, Batman walking around Times Square. I feel really safe, with all these guys walking around. And Wonder Woman is there too, let's be clear. And Supergirl, they're all there. So a few years ago, my holiday card was Times Square in the snow. And I put 8 superheroes in the card. And underneath I said, there are 8 superheroes. Can you find them? Can you believe the response I got? And I said, please tell me the 8th one. They wouldn't tell me. So I had to tell them the 8th one, which was the Statue of Liberty, actually. But basically, I'm doing a series like that kids will like, because then mom or dad can say, there are 8 superheroes in this painting. Can you find them? There are worse ways to get involved with art.
No, sounds like fun. I love that idea.
Those are fun. And
the Harrison Library has its juried art program every year. So if you'd like to submit an application, I don't think there'll be a problem with having you your actual paintings on view in our community room, which would be incredible to see them in person. Something to think about. I know you have plenty of other venues, but if you wanted to branch out into Westchester.
Well, my wife tells me I'm retired, so I probably have more time than you think.
Bijan has a question. Do you always use canvas, masonite? What do you normally use?
Yeah, I can answer that real quick. When I paint, first of all, I don't use acrylics. Personally, I don't have the touch for acrylics. Again, it sounds like you're an artist, and you develop a touch for what you do, and I respect people who can develop a touch for lots of surfaces. Me, I use oil, and I find that works best for me on canvas, either stretch canvas or canvas panels. The other media, the mixed media, almost has to go on paper. If it went on, you said, like, was it Formica or Mason? It's too shiny, and it won't take the crayons well. The paper takes the oil pastels very well, and it also takes the ink very well. So I haven't tried. The question is a good one for me, though. I really should think about other stuff. I don't want to be, welded into one way of doing things, but I have to think about that. But I think I'm happy. I used to do lots of silk screen. I used to do etching, and I always enjoyed that too. But I find oils and this mixed media technique developed very satisfying, because it gives me a range. As I said, I use oils for the more heavier topics. That's the right way to say it. For the heavier topics, the more moody topics, and I can use the mixed media for the. They're not lighter necessarily. I mean, the teddy bear on the highway wasn't exactly a light painting, but people would come up and I wouldn't exactly start crying, but they didn't feel really good after that. Until I told them I was going to do another painting, where they pick up the teddy bear. Don't tell anybody, but I haven't really started that painting yet, but I will. Anyway, so the point is, I think as an artist, you want to have a number of things available for you. And on the other hand, if you have too many things, too many choices, at least I would be overwhelmed. And so that's why at the moment I'm just focusing on these two. I like to get back to silkscreen. Oh, I know what I'm saying. I really shouldn't mention this. I've taken up another career, improv and stand-up comedy. And in fact, I'll be appearing in the comedy club later this month in New York, believe it or not. But I found that there's a connection between my stand-up comedy and cartoons. and I'm sorry if this is changing the subject tremendously, but I find that if I take one of my stand-up routines, I can chop it up into cartoons. And a number of you know cartoons is a hot area in art. And so I've been experimenting with that. I just haven't gotten time to do it yet. But, you know, retirement can be good. Yeah, retirement can be good. And they're just, you know, there's just lots of stuff you can still do.
Well, yes, let us know when you're appearing. You said at the end of the month, so some of us may want to come down to the city and meet you in
You
person.
got 6 minutes. I'll give you the one of the times. I don't, the Harrison Library maybe we'll do a different virtual program for that.
Yes, we're open for all suggestions. And I just wanted to mention, B. John wrote that masonite can be sanded, so you undo this shiny
Thank you.
surface.
See, I knew you knew what you're talking about. I could tell. I could tell. And that, yeah, because I need the rough surface. May I ask you, do you paint on masonite? I'm the person who asked the question.
Yes.
No,
Is he there still?
No. She
No.
said, I think she said no.
Oh,
no.
okay. All right. All right. I was looking for tips, always looking for tips. Hints.
And
Anything else?
another comment from Akiko that she appreciates your wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
And I mentioned Akiko's in Japan, so it's your your art is worldwide in terms of your audience, which is
Yeah,
wonderful.
I just got an email from a friend of mine. I don't want to tell you the company, but you would know his name. In Japan, he was a former student of mine at Columbia, and we've stayed in touch for many, many years. And so I try to stay in touch with him. And
Yeah.
he was kind enough to send me a note saying he enjoyed the virtual show.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. So we're at 8:05 at the moment, and if anyone has any questions, we can take them now. You can unmute, type in the chat box. Otherwise, I will thank Don Sexton for tonight's talk. This has been wonderful, heartbreaking in a sense to think that 20 years has gone by
Yeah.
and it doesn't seem possible, but your paintings, to me, speak about hope, speak about perseverance, the colors, the vibrancy, which is so much a part of New York. That's all captured so beautifully in your paintings. So
Well,
thank you so much.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.